Another week of Find the Fairway Live. I am Chris Brees, and thanks so much for being with us once again, everybody, because this week is a really special treat because on the show today, you see so many great betting experts in golf who so claim themselves as great, but a lot of them do the exact same thing every week, and it looks pretty tedious, right? But this time around, I wanted to show you one guy who's really kind of revolutionizing the way that golf betting is done and does things that 99% of guys don't think about. His name is Klos. He's a Betsperts golf analyst. It's an up-and-coming program here that has subscriptions available, and the guy is nailing things like crazy, including Chris Kirk. He got him at plus 3,300 at the Honda last week. We're going to dive into how Ron figured out the best way to bet on Chris Kirk and what his entire strategy entails. Of course, picking methods every week and getting a little bit into the Arnold Palmer Invitational this week. So with that said, here he is, Klos. Thanks for being on the show, man. So many people try to do what you're doing, but I'm really glad to pick your brain here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. First of all, in honor of both of us being Michigan men, I've decided to dress the part. So go blue, we'll get that out of the way, and really thankful that you had me on today.
I told myself that we wouldn't talk about Michigan football. We would stick to golf, but I just got to tell everybody, I think the only reason why you agreed to do this, you get a lot of requests, was having the Michigan connection. But that's going to be neither here nor there. I know people are curious, Ron, about what your background is, how you got into all this. You grew up in Michigan, you grew up in Detroit, of course, and you've really basically been a lifetime coach, right, in basketball and football.
Yeah, so golf hasn't really been a featured part of my background. You know, I played basically 3-4 sports per year in high school. I went to Division II college, Hillsdale, played wide receiver on the football team. 1 year, my senior year, was on the golf team. But pretty much after that, I went straight into coaching. Basketball has always been my favorite sport, and I got hired at Schoolcraft Junior College as an assistant coach, and we were one of the best teams in the nation. Long story short, went from there to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I coached varsity basketball. Eventually made it down to Denton, Texas, where I was a history teacher and coached football and basketball for a number of years. Now, full circle, I'm back to Michigan, where I grew up. And, all this time, I've always played golf. Always been a huge fan of the PGA Tour. I've always been fascinated with, data and kind of digging deeper. And kind of the last 10 years, I started to kind of build my own fantasy and betting models for football, basketball. And then kind of during the pandemic, when we were all stuck in the house and, 3 small children, no sports, no sports to distract us. And, I'm sure you remember that stretch of time. But yeah, the PGA Tour, I just kind of got into the data and started digging in, and, they were one of the first.
Because of COVID.
Because of COVID, huh. Yep. And, they're one of the first sports that, had a set date when they were going to return.
They were the first.
Yeah. And so I just kind of started digging into the data, and, I started the Twitter account with basically the simple intention of just trying to post, different types of data for each event that nobody else was really kind of looking at. And yeah, it just kind of took off from there.
How did the football and basketball stuff go for you? You said you did it for 10 years. How'd that go?
Yeah, it was decent. It was, those sports are completely different from golf.
God. Statistically,
team,
betting,
statistically,
absolutely.
Yeah. They're team events, and, golf is kind of just I just kind of fell in love with, the individual aspect of it. And then you throw in the course, each course has its own specific traits. And, I've got to give credit to Josh Culp, who I think he's Future Fantasy on Twitter. He's kind of the inspiration that, I kind of took this idea from. And, when you think about it, each golf course and how each individual player then fits that course based on their past performance on other similar courses. And, with golf, there's just so many variables involved, from grass type to windy conditions to long versus short courses to, like this week, you have a less than driver course at Bay Hill. And then, I could go on for hours, but yeah, each week, I just kind of deep dive into these splits and compare them to a player's baseline over time, and just kind of see who pops out.
Because what most guys do who do this so-called for a profession, they have this kind of chart, and you'll see this everywhere, of all these different strokes gain categories and who's the best. For example, Chris Kirk was 4th here. You see he's highlighted in yellow. He was top 4 in your eyes, which we'll get to Chris Kirk in a minute, but take me through what shots gained means on the tee, approach, around the green, putting, ball striking. What does that mean? Because I feel like most people don't technically know what that means.
So yeah, basically, for each round, every player obviously who completes the round, they have an average. So if their scoring average, for example, was, if the average for everybody who played that round was, we'll say 70.5, and it's a par 72 course,
Mm-hmm.
you basically, that player who finished 70.5 would be, based on what the average for everybody was. You would kind of take that number and you would see how much each player kind of gained or lost strokes based on what the field average was. And so that's kind of the same for, those four categories: off the tee, approach, around the green, and putting. And so it's really a great way to kind of measure, you know, every tournament is different. For example, this week is a really strong field event.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to compare strong field events to weak field events. And so the strokes gained kind of allows you to kind of see for each specific round, who really played well that week, and kind of who didn't, based on those strokes gained averages.
And I keep mentioning that Ron takes it to a new level. So what I want to start with here, Ron, is the process you went through to pick Chris Kirk this week. We see him highlighted. He was number 4 on your board for strokes gained, but you could have picked anybody around there. Okay, so you went through the process, right? You did what everybody else does. You saw all of his strokes gained. A lot of guys, he went, how does he do in Florida? How does he do on this course history? Some of these were good stats. Some of them were okay. What was your process like to begin with in picking somebody like him, picking a winner each week?
Yeah, and full transparency, I did also select Aaron Wise.
You had a
And
couple, but I mean,
yeah,
that's fine. But
yeah,
Kirk was up there, and he had a good value too.
oh yeah, for sure. And Aaron Wise is someone that I struggle with, because he seems like he's always ready to go off, and he just never does. As me and Ryan Noonan over at Betsperts, we kind of have the same problem with him. But
Yeah.
no, so yeah, so like you said, I I run my own model for every event, where all these strokes gained metrics and kind of the other important data points based on the course. And last week, Chris Kirk, when you look at the numbers, basically he's top 5 in ball striking when you combine off the tee and approach.
Mm-hmm.
You add in his current form heading into the Honda, where he had 2 top 3 finishes, and then you add in his course history. He had a 7th place finish last year at the Honda, and then 25th the year before. So he was kind of trending up. Plus, like you mentioned, he finished high in all those special splits for the week. Performance on water heavy courses, weak field events, Florida. So basically, when you tie all these things together, for me, it paints a picture of a player who I thought was primed for a big week. And again, it was a very weak field event at the Honda, which kind of, Chris Kirk is perfect for these weeks. And, so that's kind of what goes into, my player selection process, whether it's for betting or DFS, is just kind of, almost like all these ingredients coming together. And when they all mix, and, Chris Kirk just kind of checked all the boxes. And for me, at 33-1, he was just kind of a play I had to make.
And here's where your process gets fascinating to me, because you can look at this list and say, well, some of these are impressive. Maybe I'm not really sure about him on the greens and around the greens. Well, here's where you started to really dive into this. You touched on it a little bit. So you took a weak field, right, from what it was at the Honda, and his scoring average on weak fields, which have the toughest scoring, which is what Honda typically is, toughest scoring course on the entire PGA, and you compared that to average fields with normal guys playing, and then average scoring, and you saw the difference there. That's what I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and you have to be a little bit careful, because some of these guys don't have enough sample size with their rounds. But once you get up, I usually like to take at least 16 rounds, and hopefully I get more than that. And you do get more than that on a lot of these guys. But yeah, I think it's just a great way to kind of look and see, okay, does a player really raise his game on these types of courses? There's certain guys I've talked with on the tour who, flat out told me, guys who grew up in Florida. Now, Chris Kirk wasn't one of these, but they just have a comfort level around water. They grew up around it, they're used to it. On the other hand, you have some other guys who water just, for me personally, it does, but most amateurs, I'm sure. But when you see those lakes surrounding you off the tee, it kind of gives you, some shaky drives. And so Chris Kirk was a guy who, just kind of played above his baseline in a lot of those areas.
Because you took the weak field and the scoring, you compared that, and then you also went one step further. You mentioned courses with a lot of water and courses that had a lot of double bogeys. You researched the fact that Honda at PGA National had the most double bogeys of anybody. So you took that and you saw that Chris Kirk also had a almost half a stroke of scoring of shots gained over the rest of the field. So that's just the kind of stuff that you don't find anywhere else. How do you go through that each week and try to find as many courses with that unique stat every time?
So yeah, I have a kind of a database I've built, which kind of started from a couple of years ago, just with every course and all the details, and how many water hazards, how many bunkers, and so that's just something that I take a look at for every week. And so like this week, Arnold Palmer is somewhat going to be similar to the Honda. You have another difficult course, you have lots of water involved, Bermuda greens. It's a strong field event this time, and so those are. I'll kind of have the same process this week for this tournament. And just really quick, going back a couple of weeks, at the last one, I think it was the Genesis, very strong field, elevated event, just like this week. And, I'm sure Will Zalatoris is going to be on top again because he always is on top for these strong field events. And for some reason, even I doubted him a little bit at the Genesis because of, some injury concerns, but, there he was again, just, I think he was top 10. And so, I'll do the same process this week, and I'll be posting some of this stuff shortly as well.
How many hours a week? Let's say it's a Sunday night and then the tournament's Thursday morning. How many hours does this take? Like, what's the prep work?
Yeah, there's a lot of prep work. That's a balance for me because, again, with 3 kids and, you're trying to be there, and, it's my full-time job as well to do this. And so, when you're passionate about something, you almost have to take a step back sometimes and say, okay, I've got to get at least a few hours of sleep tonight. So, I'm always building, I'm always trying to add, eventually over time, it's going to get less, but, kind of right now I'm still in the building stage and still trying to add more things and come up with more ideas. So the research is fun. But yeah, it is from Sunday through, the tournament starts almost going up to Thursday morning. I'm kind of always trying to do something.
Adapt or die mentality. You have to have it if you're going to survive. So you might notice if you follow Ron on Twitter that he likes to do these hitting on all trends categories. And just because, to preface, Ron, just because a player hits on all trends doesn't mean you're going to pick them, right? Because these 4 guys, Max Homa, Rory McIlroy, Hideki Matsuyama, and Tyrrell Hatton, this week at the API, you say hit on all your trends. What does hitting on all trends mean, first of all?
So some people love trends, some people hate them. Some people think they have no relevance at all. And so I agree with both sides, actually. I think actually some courses, based on whether course history is predictive there or not, I think it becomes more relevant, like at Augusta National. I think this week, the Bay Hill course, according to Data Golf, it is the 4th most predictive course. So in weeks like this, where there's a history of it being predictive, I think you can put a little more, a little more importance into these trends. So yeah, when you look at some of the ones I have, a lot of them are based on their past performance here at the Arnold Palmer. Now, with this being an elevated event this week, everybody's here. Now, this is a course that some players just have not chosen to play at. Like, for example, Patrick Cantlay has never played here. Justin Thomas, Xander Schauffele have only played here one time.
Which makes your job incredibly tough.
Yeah, and so these trends, they're not going to obviously relate to those players because they just haven't played here. Now, there's other trends related to, for example, 23 of the last 26 winners here have been in the top 40 in the official world golf rankings. Okay, so obviously these elite players are going to fit some of these other trends, but those players that you have on the screen here, they fit all 9 trends. Now, again, doesn't mean you should bet them, but Chris Kirk was on this list last week, and so I think even if you're playing, DFS, DraftKings, these are all, for me at least, these will be guys who will be in my lineup because, I think this week it is more predictive.
I know it's Tuesday morning, the time that we're taping this, so I'm not going to make you make picks this week at the API because I know you have a lot more research to do. before you put it out on your website to all your subscribers of who you think has the best chances to give people some money. So what I do want to do is play a game before we go here. I want you to pick which of these four options would be the most surprising to you this week at the Arnold Palmer, because you mentioned Rory McIlroy should be at the top of most people's list. Now, is it a good value? Is it risky? Everybody can decide that for themselves, but Rory outside the top 25, which he's been outside the top 25 a lot recently, outside of that CJ Cup win he had a few months ago. Jon Rahm and Max Homa, the two guys who have been lights out for the last 2 months, both of them outside the top 5, which would mean that those guys have finally dropping off and not going to contend in an elevated event, because both of them have. Or Scotty Scheffler wins again. He won here last year. He won a few weeks ago. Or lastly, a long shot winner comes home with the title at the API. Which of these four would surprise you the most?
Now, taking the long shot winner, I think, would be the easy way out. Now, that being said, I don't think there's any way a long shot wins this week. Matt Every won this 2 years in a row, which me and other people still have no idea how he did that. But yeah, in this type of field, that's not happening. But yeah, I'm going to go Rory, finishing inside the top 25 for sure. In his mind, he struggled his last 2 events, finishing the 32nd, 29th. But I mean, his advanced metrics tell a whole different story. He's been awesome tee to green. His struggles have been the last couple rounds putting, losing over 8 strokes. But Bay Hill, he's dominated here throughout his career, gaining, 2.33 strokes per round. And even on the greens, he's averaging over a half a stroke per round in the 32 rounds he's played here. So he knows these greens. He's very familiar with this course. And another thing, that a lot of people don't think about is his ball flight is so high and these greens are so firm and fast. And so higher ball flights are going to land softer on these firm greens. And so I think that's another advantage that he'll have this week, especially with the weather and the winds picking up.
30 miles an hour on Friday. Yep. Holy crap.
Yep. And even talking about the speeds of the greens getting up to 14 on the stent meter, which is just ultra fast. And so I think he's going to have a big week. Jon Rahm had his turn, Scotty won in Phoenix, and I think Rory's going to be plenty motivated to show up here and probably win this thing.
Do you ever, I don't want to say buyer's remorse, but you had mentioned that you're adapting what you do all the time. Do you ever find where you may be doing a metric that you thought you might like for a few months and then it doesn't really work out for you and then you stop doing it, and then all of a sudden, if you would have done it a few months later and you didn't, the guy ends up winning?
Yeah, I'm sure that has happened. I can't think of an example off the top of my head.
Well, that's good. It means it probably doesn't happen very often for you.
I mean, putting is always very fickle, where you kind of look and you see a week where, a Sam Burns is, he's so good on Bermuda putting, and then he, maybe put a little too much emphasis in that, because, putting, it tends to be very volatile. But that would be the best example I can give for that.
All right, Ron, this was awesome. I'm glad you did this. Before you go, I want to make sure everybody can see where they can connect with you on Twitter, PGA Splits 101. That's a very aptly named, because you're basically taking people to school about how to best maximize their bets on the PGA Tour. Tell me about Betspertsgolf.com, what you guys got going on there and your subscription plans.
Yeah, so we've just started here, not even a year yet. Me, Ryan Noonan, Andy Molitor, we're kind of going every week and kind of digging deep. We're kind of more data driven. We have certain podcasts we put out every week as well for betting and for DFS. Subscriptions, we have a very active Discord. Every pick we make is there. I write a course preview every week, betting articles, DraftKings articles. There's a lot of people. Pat James also just joined our team. So we're growing, and it's a very reasonably priced compared to some of the other competitors out there. And we got a lot of other things in the future that we're going to be getting out there soon that we're very excited about. So yeah, we're growing. Betspertsgolf.com is where you can find me at.
And you are updating models through the weekend, right? I mean, on Sunday at the Honda, you had updated numbers of what you thought might happen. So it's not just a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, here's who I'm picking. You're doing weekend stuff too, right?
Yeah, I read a round by round article each night. So I kind of get into, and that's kind of my specialty that I've had even the most success with is second round bets, third round bets. Three balls have been very profitable. And so, yeah, I kind of have a round by round where I look at the matchups, and I built a model for that as well. Just kind of looking for any edge that people can get when they make their bets per round. And so, yeah, even for Showdown for DraftKings, a lot of people play. So, yeah, we try to cover all the bases there.
Betting is so huge now. I mean, I can't believe, I guess I can believe with how media is adapting nowadays that really betting is pushing most sports now. And you probably got to agree that the PGA Tour, they are leaning hard into the future of betting.
Yeah, it's growing as more states kind of join the party here. Especially when you think about California one day, some of these big states, it's just going to keep getting bigger. And yeah, the PGA is adapting. They're including more of this content, even on their leaderboards. And so yeah, it's really impressive to see kind of where it's gone over the last couple of years.
Ron Klos, Betspertsgolf.com. Check him out online, social media, and subscribe to all the great PGA Tour action and advice they have there. I can almost guarantee you that Ron Klos will make you some money, at least at some point, any kind of time on the PGA Tour. Ron, thanks so much, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.